We were talking of waviness being desirable. So the last thing that we said is that the surface requirement is that the surface should be rough, you can easily hold it, and so on, right? So it is waviness. Some of you wrote that on roads, if you want rough surface, right? Normally roads are pretty nice and so on, but to give traction between the tires of the vehicles and cars and so on and the road, you need certain roughness. If the road is very smooth, cars will slip and so on. So yes, some sort of roughness is required, but a wave pattern is not generally the thing. Wave pattern on roads will be a very bad engineering design. General roughness on the road, yes, but not a wavy pattern in general. So even if this answer is there somewhere on some internet slide and so on, it is by someone who is not thinking very clearly. That roughness on the road is a general roughness so that there is good traction between tires and the road and the automobiles do not slip. But it is not a wave pattern. A wave pattern is very bad. There will be huge amount of discomfort in the driving and so on, and the road will break much more easily. When is waviness undesirable? Normally waviness is undesirable, it is a defect. So now when it is undesirable, between mating surfaces means whenever you have to fit one surface against the other, right? There is a rod fitting inside a hole, there is one piece fitting against the other piece. Lots and lots of times in an assembly in a product, one part is fitting against the other part. So the two surfaces should exactly match. So if there is waviness, then the fitting will not be right. So the final dimension of the assembled portion will not be right, and the locking joint between them will not be good. So there will be uneven mating between contacting surfaces. Difficulty of providing a tight seal. So it is another type of this thing. Then when two surfaces are being joined together, two parts are being joined together, and they should be very closely sealed and tightened together. There should not be any air gap, any other gap between them. But if there are waves on the surface, then there will be a lot of gap. Whatever you do, you are trying to force the two surfaces against each other as close as they can go, but there is some waviness there. So the contact will not be airtight, isn't it? And then whenever surfaces are sliding against each other, as we said earlier, sliding against each other, then the sliding will not be smooth because there is a rough surface. There is waviness. If the surface was flat, then the sliding could be nice. If the surface is wavy type, then the sliding is not smooth, and this can lead to excessive friction, excessive chatter and vibration, and ultimately breaking away and the fracture and so on. Right? So again, this was a question where you need not look into any notes or internet answers or something. Right? Of course, first of all, I want to remind you again and again that you have in the beginning of the semester signed an honor statement. An honor statement, honor is a huge big thing. When you are signing that, you are saying, Ya Allah, you are my witness. Ya Allah, you are my witness. I am signing and I am saying that during any quiz or any exam, I will not take any help from anybody. I will look only at the question paper and the formula sheet and tables provided. I will not look into my books. I will not look into my notes. I will not take help from the internet. This is your honor. This is a huge big thing. But unfortunately, sometimes I see answers which are not possible if you were doing this. There are answers from other internet sources sometimes, naudzubillah. There are answers and solution methodologies which we have not discussed in the course. So if you have not been able to follow what we have covered in the class, how we have solved the problems and so on, and then you come up with a totally brand new technique. That technique may be very correct, but we have not even covered it in the class. So if you can't solve a problem by a method which is covered in the class and you bring another type of problem, then it is highly improbable that you did that and you are doing it yourself, right? So here again I am saying, what I was saying is that if you look into other sources, if it was on homework, okay, but if it is a quiz or an exam, then it is na'udhu dishonesty. It is against your honor. But what I am saying is that if you think a little, you are senior engineers, you have done a lot of courses on science and engineering. If you just think, when can be waviness of a surface, small or large, when can it be good, when can it be bad, you can give all the answers yourself. Next one. What is the consequence of setting lower and upper control limits close to the grand average in a control chart? You see, if there is a control chart, there is a mean value. That mean value, right, from each sample you have a mean, you have an average, and you have several samples. So therefore it is called a grand average, not x bar, x double bar. So that mean value is the mean value. And there is an upper control value and there is a lower control value. And all your production will be good if every product that you make is between the upper and lower limits. If it is outside the upper limit, if it is outside the lower limit, then you are out of control, right? So this is your control chart. Mean in the beginning, in the middle, upper control limit here, lower control limit here. What they are saying is that the upper control limit and the lower control limit are very close to the mean, are very close to the mean. Now, unfortunately, many of you in the midterm got it wrong. They perhaps did not understand or read this question carefully. But Alhamdulillah, there were again then many others who got it right. So you see, what is the question? That there is a control chart, so there is a mean value line. And the upper control and lower control lines are very close to it. So there is almost no gap above and below. So what will happen? What will happen? This will result in tight tolerances, right? The tolerance is the difference between the upper and lower limit. So if there is a big difference between the upper and lower limit, the tolerance is nice and easy. But if it is very close to each other, it is tight tolerance. So tight tolerance has two problems. Tight tolerance has two problems always. What are they? If it is beyond the process capability of the equipment, the tolerance is very tight, your machine cannot produce it. All the machines that you have cannot produce such tight tolerances. So if it is beyond the capability of your equipment, many parts produced will be outside the specified limits. So there will be a large amount of rejection or a large amount of rework, and both will cost you a lot, right? If your machines do not have the capability of producing such tight tolerances, then most of the parts produced will be rejected. So either they are thrown away as junk or reworking has to be done on them, and in both cases the cost and the time of your production will increase a lot. If your machine can do this, if these tight tolerances can be maintained, the cost of the product will be too high and the production time will be too long. The tolerance is very tight. So of course you will have to do it very slowly with a very accurate machine with highly accurate tools. So the cost of the product will go high and the time of production will be too long, right? So upper and lower control limits should generally be not very close to the mean value, to the grand average. So if this is your answer, Alhamdulillah, very good. But otherwise, just think about it, that you are thinking that the question is different, or you are giving a wrong answer if you are thinking that the question is right. This question, question 3, had a small problems where you think about the manufacturing. Where you think about the manufacturing, you do not give a calculation answer. You think about it. Do you understand, right? So there was a fourth one. So this is the 3D. What are the 3 basic categories of casting processes when classified by molds and patterns? Right? So this is important. You can classify according to hot processing, cold processing, according to die casting, sand casting. No, here we are saying according to molds and patterns. When you think of molds and patterns only, then how do you categorize the casting process? So using molds and patterns as process classification factors results in three general use. Single use molds. Molds can be used only one time, they are broken. With multiple use patterns, patterns can be used many times. So this is called expendable mold, permanent pattern casting, right? Single use molds. Molds are still used only once, they will be broken. And the patterns are also single use. The patterns will also be used only once. So expendable mold, expendable pattern casting. This is what's the name. And multiple use molds, right? Multiple use molds. The molds can be used again and again. So therefore, it is a permanent mold casting. There is no pattern now. The mold itself is the pattern, right? So this is called permanent mold casting. So expendable mold, permanent pattern, expendable mold, expendable pattern, and permanent mold. These are the three classes of casting processes when you are classifying based on molds and patterns, right? So if you are giving any other answer, unfortunately, then that has got nothing to do with it. And naudzubillah, some of you always do that, right? So the thing is that this means that when you are going through the lecture notes, when you are going through the video lectures, you are not paying attention. Or naudzubillah, you are thinking that, you see, at the exam time, I will use some other means. I will not look only at the question paper and the formula sheet. I will use some other means. So why study? Why bother? And then there are questions which need your understanding, not just numerical problem solving, your understanding. So whatever the reason, either somebody did not study well, or they did not understand and then did not clarify during the online sessions, or naudzubillah, they thought that, oh, these portions and these parts, if the question comes, I will go to some internet source, naudzubillah, and try to do it, whatever the reason. But these are simple answers. These are not answers that require a lot of extra intelligence. It is just that you have done the course well, you have understood it. If there were any doubts, you were asking them during question answer sessions and so on. And if you understand it, then you just use your brain, you just use your mind, and you can give the answers, right? So do not think that my comments are any criticism on anyone, particularly you. It is general. When I talk, there are 45 students in the class. It is a general comment. And I am not an alim al-ghaib, so I never know what is actually happening. But some of the answers are so outside the course and so on, that it is very difficult to believe that it is being given by someone who has only gone through a very good preparation of our lecture notes, our book, and our solutions, right? So don't take it to heart. If there is any comment, it is general. Mostly, alhamdulillah, the class is doing well. Let us go to the next question. Oh, sorry, there is a fifth part, which is the small question. Which die casting machines usually have a higher production rate, cold chamber or hot chamber, and why? And why? The answer is hot chamber machines are faster. I think your answer would be the same if you did it, because cold chamber die casting machines require molten metal to be ladled into the chamber from an external source. The furnace is here. The casting is being done here in cold chamber. They are separate. So from here, you have to bring the molten metal here, and this will be extra amount of time and effort, right? But in the hot chamber, the furnace is also here and the molding is also being done here. So ladling takes more time in cold chamber than injecting the molten metal into the die as it is in the hot chamber process. So the hot chamber process is always faster. Higher production will be there in hot chamber because directly from the furnace it is going into the die cavity, isn't it? So these are the 5 general understanding questions.